what if the Colts took Ryan Leaf in the 1998 draft? This, probably up there like in the last 20 years, especially when it comes to like quarterbacks taking the first two picks, is probably one of the most talked about theories in NFL history, probably, at least in the last 20 years. And oh my god, I've seen so many over the years. However, I don't really like them, most of them by and large, as most of them basically just flip the teams around. Oh, the Colts are terrible, and the Chargers with Peyton are Super Bowl contenders. But is that really the case? Because after all, even though both teams were terrible, they had different strengths that actually could have been complemented differently based upon the quarterback they could have taken. So I wanted to look into it for myself and to see if that is really the case. So let's get into the theory. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if? An NFL theory. After the 1997 season, the Colts hit rock bottom. Just 2 years removed after they had a Hail Mary short of making the Super Bowl, they had one of the worst offense and defense in the league. Hell, they were like one of the worst teams in the league in 97. Start off 0-10 before finishing 3-13. Meanwhile, out in San Diego, the Chargers were not faring much better. Just 3 years removed after they themselves made the Super Bowl, they started off slow and ended up being 4-4 halfway through the year, but they collapsed at the end of the year, losing all the final games to finish 4-12 with a very bad offense. However, they decided to collapse at a perfect time as both teams had really high picks going into the 1998 draft. A draft full of Pro Bowlers and Hall of Famers, but the most important topic of that draft was two quarterbacks that were very likely going to be taking the two top picks. Peyton Manning and Ryan Leaf. The Colts had the number 1 overall pick, and they needed a quarterback, so they were going to take one of those quarterbacks no matter what. The Chargers, on the other hand, were not in the better situation. They had the 3rd overall pick, and the team with the 2nd overall pick, the Cardinals, there was absolutely no guarantee whatsoever that they were not going to take the quarterback that the Colts didn't take. So to ensure that they do get the quarterback that the Colts didn't pick, they made a trade with the Cardinals to move up that one extra spot to secure them the quarterback that they didn't take. The Colts, of course, took Peyton with the 1st pick, and he would become a future Hall of Fame quarterback that would help revive the Colts, made them one of the best offensive teams throughout the 2000s, and led them to the playoffs multiple times, including leading them to 2 Super Bowls and winning one of them. However, he would then be released after 2011. He would then sign with the Broncos and would lead them to become a dominant team in the early to mid 2010s, got them to 2 Super Bowls and win one before he retired. Ryan Leaf, on the other hand, well, with the Chargers, he was terrible in his rookie season. He missed all of 1999 due to an injury, and in 2000 he really didn't get much better, and the Chargers finished 1-15. He was then cut after that season. However, his career was not over yet. He then signed with the Buccaneers during the offseason. However, just a few days before the 2001 season began, he was cut. Later on in 2001, he would sign with the Cowboys, who were having quarterback problems. He played a few games. Probably statistically overall was probably his better season, but it wasn't really saying much. After 2001, he was then released by the Cowboys. He would then sign with the Seahawks in the 2001 offseason going into 2002. And from what I heard, he was in a freeway race in a training camp to be the starting quarterback for the Seahawks. And from what I've heard from the coaches like Mike Holmgren of the Seahawks at the time, it sounded like he was actually doing pretty good in the mini camp, possibly contending for the starter. However, right before training camp and preseason came along, he decided to retire, blowing any opportunity he had to make a comeback. But what if this didn't happen? What if the Colts took Ryan Leaf instead? That is the theory, so let's get into it. Now, before I get into the theory itself, I wanted to add a little bit more context to it so you can understand the situation for both the teams and the quarterbacks going into 1998. So I'll start off with the teams themselves. First, the Colts. As I said, they were one of the worst teams in 1997 and going into 1998. They had one of the worst defenses, and their offense was really bad. However, despite their terrible offense, they had a lot of Hall of Famers on that offense. They had Marvin Harrison for wide receiver, and for running back, they had Marshall Faulk. Yes, Marshall Faulk, he was on the Colts in 1998 before he would be traded to the Rams the next year. So, the Colts had a lot of offensive powerhouses on that team, and if they just got the right quarterback, they could quickly get back into the playoff mix soon with an elite offense, as what happened in real life with Peyton. Now, the Chargers were in a different situation. Their offense was really, really bad, but their defense was pretty good. After all, it was just 3 years removed from making it to the Super Bowl, and of course they had Hall of Fame linebacker Junior Seau on the team. In fact, in 1998, their defense in some ways was very good to near elite. I think they were in the top 10 in scoring defense, and if I'm correct, they were the 6th best run defense in the league, almost near elite. So this defense was really good at least for the next few years. So if they got the right quarterback, depending on the circumstances, not only could they make a recovery, they could be back into the playoff mix as soon as maybe 1998. I'm not kidding. That's how good the Chargers defense was that year, that if they got the right quarterback, they could get right into the playoff mix that year. Now, the quarterbacks themselves. Of course, hindsight being 2020, yeah, the Colts made the right decision, but it was not guaranteed that that was going to happen. In fact, if y'all don't remember, that pick was completely up in the air. No one knew for sure exactly what the Colts were going to pick, or if everyone thought they made the right decision in picking Peyton, as Bill Polian, the general manager, was solidly in the Peyton camp. But a whole lot of the coaches and the scouts of the Colts were more into Ryan Leaf's camp. So now, why was this? Well, going into the draft, the view of Peyton was he was ready and mature. He was the NFL ready of the two. The view was he would immediately come in, be a major presence on the team, and help them recover. It was pretty much a guarantee in probably everyone's eyes that he would be a franchise quarterback. However, Ryan Leaf, he was raw. He was a gamble, basically. We don't know what he would be. However, if he's in the right system, with the right team, the right coach and staff and everything, not only could he be a franchise quarterback, but he could play even better than Peyton and be the better quarterback of the two. That was the idea of the teams and the players going into the draft. And that's why Peyton and Ryan Leaf was so up in the air going into the draft. And it was not a guarantee at first that the Colts made the right decision, although we now know they did. But let's get into the theory now. What if the Colts took Ryan Leaf? It's the 1998 draft, and the Chargers, still desperate to get the quarterback that the Colts didn't take, still make that trade with the Cardinals with the number 2 pick. And then, for the Colts, for some reason or another, maybe the coaching staff had more say, maybe the Colts owner at the time pressured the shit out of Polian to take Ryan Leaf. Either way, the Colts took Ryan Leaf. And after that, the Chargers took Peyton Manning. So now, both teams have their quarterbacks. So now let's get into the season. As the 1998 season came to a beginning, both the Colts and the Chargers fan bases were absolutely excited about the future of their teams with their franchise quarterbacks that they just drafted. As we first start off with the Colts, with Ryan Leaf, he played pretty solidly in the preseason. However, once the regular season came around, it was awful. He was really bad. Now, there actually is an argument that he could have gone either way. He could have been bad, or he could have been even better than he was with the Chargers. Because remember, they had the offensive firepower in the Colts that the Chargers did not have. He had actual weapons, so on the one hand, he could have played better. But of course, at the same time, he had a very bad defense now instead of having a really good defense with the Chargers. So it might have evened itself out and probably made no real difference whatsoever, since he would have to throw a lot more and play a lot more to catch up with their defense, allowing so many big plays and forced turnovers on him to happen. But in the end, I think it probably would have been exactly the same, if not worse, especially since the team was so bad, that the Colts end up collapsing after their 3-13 1997 run and finished 1-15 in 1998 as the worst team in the league. Meanwhile, out in San Diego, the excitement was high in Chargers country as their new quarterback Peyton Manning, hoping to get a lot of shit done in the upcoming year. And just like with Ryan Leaf, anything could change with Peyton, because in that year, in his rookie year, Peyton had, I think, broke the record for the most passing yards for a rookie, and he set the most passing touchdowns, but he also threw the league's highest interceptions that year, almost 30 interceptions. And he does not have the offensive firepower that he does with the Colts now with the Chargers, but he has the defense now, which he did not have with the Colts. So like I said, it could even itself out and probably make no difference. However, with that really good defense, the Chargers play a lot better with a lot better quarterback with Peyton. And in the most anticipated matchup in Week 5, when the Chargers visit the Colts, in our timeline, Peyton's Colts beat the Chargers. This time around, Peyton with the Chargers beat the Colts. And as the year went on, Peyton got a little bit better, did not force as many turnovers, and the defense still played really good. And the Chargers surprised everyone after going 4-12, finishing with a winning record at 10-6. As the updated 1998 standing shows, in the NFC side, nothing changes except for the Buccaneers now making the playoffs instead of the Cardinals, as the Cardinals lost their final regular season game to the Chargers instead of beating them. Now the AFC side changes quite a bit. The first 4 teams remain exactly the same, but the Chargers now make the playoffs as the 5th seed, as the Bills fall to the 6th seed. The wild card round of the playoffs would begin with one of the most anticipated matchups in playoff history probably at that point, as the Chargers visit the Dolphins. Peyton Manning going up against Dan Marino in the playoffs. However, in his first playoff game, with the Chargers still not in the best shape, of course going up against Dan Marino in his last good year, against the #1 defense in the league on the road, Peyton and the Chargers would struggle, and the Dolphins would make quick work of them to move on. Following that would be the Cowboys still losing to the Buccaneers, probably in the same way that they lost to the Cardinals. And then the next day, the Bills visit the Jaguars, and this time around, I think the Bills actually could pull it off over the Jaguars instead of the Jaguars beating the Patriots, as I think the Bills were a much better team than the Patriots at the time, and they did beat the Jaguars in the regular season. However, they would lose to the Broncos in the divisional round, along with the Jets still beating the Dolphins, followed by the Vikings holding on to beat the Buccaneers, who were really surging at this point at the end of the year. So now our conference championships remain the same. However, I think this time around, the Vikings, when they host the Falcons, after having a tough, hard-fought game against the Buccaneers, probably would take the Falcons a lot more seriously. Instead of Anderson missing the field goal, the Vikings actually get more aggressive offensively and actually get a touchdown instead, and they hold on to get the victory to make it to the Super Bowl. Super Bowl 33 is now the Broncos and the Vikings, the matchup that we never got and we wanted. Now, who would win this? Well, looking at their stats, as the Broncos had a really good offense, but the Vikings, of course, had the #1 offense in the league. Defensively, they were probably around the same. I think maybe the Vikings probably would hold on for the win, maybe, at least with their offense being better than the Broncos' offense, to get their first title in 29 years and ruin Elway's retirement. It's now 1999, and after their very disappointing year, the Colts with Ryan Leaf hope to finally get something going in his sophomore season. However, just like last year, it would be another disaster, as Ryan Leaf still would suffer his season-ending injury. So now, who would the Colts have at the play their quarterback in 1999? Steve Walsh, who was Troy Aikman's backup for a while. And at this point in his career, he has not really played much since 1994. In fact, he has not thrown a touchdown in that 5 years since, including throwing so many interceptions. And with this in mind, their offensive juggernaut, which began in 1999, does not get going whatsoever, as the offense completely struggles, but their defense plays a little bit better that year. In the end, the Colts do improve a little bit, but only by 1 game to 2-14, as they've now won just 6 games in the last 3 years. But the story is completely different out in San Diego after the Chargers just made the playoffs the year before with their sophomore quarterback in Peyton. They hope to go even farther, as he did much better in his sophomore season. However, the defense took a little bit of a step back as it was getting old, but the Chargers improved to get to 11-5. The AFC side of the playoffs changes a lot in the 1999 playoffs, as the Bills now get the 2nd seed, as the Chargers now win the AFC West and got the 3rd seed, the Jets make the playoffs as the 5th seed, and the Chiefs actually get in as the 6th seed. And the wild card would begin with the Jets at the Titans. However, the Titans were a really good team. The Jets won 4 in a row at the end of the year, but they were pretty much struggling at this point still, so I think the Titans would hold on to get that victory. And then it will be the Chiefs at the Chargers first home playoff game in 4 years, as the Chiefs kind of struggled that year near the end, and the Chargers looked like they're on a roll at this point. So with that, I think the Chargers would hold on and get the victory, their first playoff win in 5 years. However, the next week, they would have to visit the Bills, and the same situation, on the road, in the elements, with the 2nd best defense in the league. I think the Chargers would struggle once again, and the Bills would move on to the AFC Championship, where they now host the Titans after they beat the Jaguars. And this time around, at home, I think the Bills would get the win, which sets them up at the Super Bowl against the Rams. However, against the league's 2nd best defense, against the greatest show on turf, as we saw, the Rams beat the Titans in the Super Bowl, even though the Titans' defense was really, really good. I think the Rams would hold on and still beat the Bills to get their first title in 48 years. It's now the new millennium into the 2000 season, and after 2 years, the patience with the Colts is really running thin with Ryan Leaf. However, he recovers from his injury, and he gets his starting job back in 2000, and finally, with his first full season as a starter, he plays solid. Not spectacular like Peyton at this point, but not bust level. Just a solid season for a quarterback from 2000 you would expect. And the Colts get a modest bump as they finish 6-10, winning the same amount of games they did the last 3 years combined in one season. But out in San Diego, Peyton Manning and the Chargers, the expectation continues to soar. 2 straight years of making the playoffs, won the AFC West and won a playoff game this year. The Chargers now officially had Super Bowl aspirations going into 2000. However, the season would be a major disappointment, as the defense fell apart a little bit as they were getting old. But the main problem was the 2000 Chargers had the worst running offense in the entire league in NFL history in the 16-game schedule. I think they averaged just like 60 yards a game running the ball. And of course, this would lead to them drafting LaDainian Tomlinson in the next draft. Peyton would struggle a bit with this terrible running game, and the Chargers ended up falling off and ended up finishing 8-8 and missing the playoffs. In the updated 2000 standings, the NFC side changes one little bit as the Rams and Saints swap places. However, the AFC side changes a lot, as the Dolphins now get the 2nd seed, the Broncos now win the AFC West and move up to the 3rd seed, the Raiders fall all the way down to the 5th seed, and the Jets make the playoffs as the 6th seed. Since I don't think it would change anything whatsoever if the Rams beat the Saints and then lose to the Vikings, the rest of the NFC side remains the same as the Giants make the Super Bowl still. In the wild card round, the AFC side will start off with the Jets at the Broncos, as the Jets were struggling near the end of this point in the year, but the Broncos were really, really good, had the 2nd best offense in the league, really looked like a scary threat, and without the Ravens to deal with, I think the Broncos actually would pull it off. Followed by the Raiders visiting the Ravens, and I think the Ravens would get this easily. Then it would be the Broncos at the Dolphins, in a matchup between the elite offense going up against a really good defense. And of course, I think the defense would win out as the Dolphins make it to the AFC Championship. And then it would be the Ravens at the Titans, a titanic showdown in the AFC Central. Now, of course, the Ravens won this. However, I think this time around, I think the Titans would get it. Because remember, the game was tied at 10 going into the fourth quarter, but then the Ravens got those two incredible lucky plays, that returned kick for a touchdown, and then an incredible 50-yard interception returned by Ray Lewis. I thought growing up that those were just so miraculous that if they play that game again, I don't think the results would happen the exact same way like that. So I think the Titans this time around would hold on and beat the Ravens, which sets up the AFC Championship. Dolphins at the Titans, and I think the Titans, with just as good of a defense as the Ravens at home, I think they'll get the win. So now Super Bowl 35 is the Titans at the Giants, and just like the Ravens did, the Titans with just as good of a defense as the Ravens did, in some ways even better, I think the Titans would beat the Giants just in the same way as the Ravens did to get their first title in 49 years. Now, I might come back to this in a future video, but I'm going to wrap it up right here, especially since we don't know really at all what would happen, since Ryan Leaf really did not play whatsoever. But I am going to summarize still what I think what would happen in 2001. After his solid season in 2000, Ryan Leaf would completely fall apart in 2001 as the Colts had one of the league's worst defenses that year. He would struggle as he had no protection on that defense whatsoever, and they would completely fall apart, be one of the worst teams in the league, and they probably would cut him at the end of 2001. However, the problem for the Colts is, since the Texans were joined and the Lions still would have the worst record then, they would not be able to draft either David Carr or Joey Harrington, so who knows exactly what they would do with a quarterback situation at that point, and who knows if anyone would pick up Ryan Leaf afterwards. Meanwhile, for the Chargers with Peyton Manning, they probably would be around the same thing in 2001 as they were in 2000, around 500, as the team was really in a rebuilding mode. And to make matters even worse for them is, since they did so much better in 2000, they would not be in any situation whatsoever to draft LT. Now, of course, that would open up a different scenario, a very interesting one. Where would LT go? And of course, since the Chargers now have Peyton, they have no need to draft Drew Brees, which opens up an even other more interesting topic. So who knows exactly what will happen after that, but until they get that running back, they're probably going to be around 500. Although going into 2002, that'll be kind of interesting to see, because who knows, maybe they'd be bad enough to finally get a good running back in 2002, and they can finally begin rebuilding to become a dominant team. Who knows, maybe they can become just as scary, if not even more scary, in the mid to late 2000s with Peyton as their quarterback instead of Drew Brees or Phillip Rivers. But hey, it's just a theory, an NFL theory. Thanks for watching, and it's so nice to finally do this video after almost 5 months away from when I did my last one. However, this will be the last one I do from like the 90s into the 2000s into the recent decade, as the next 3 theories, I'm going to go all the way back into the 80s. In fact, the next 2 coming up are going to be extremely nostalgic, as they were the 2 very first theories I thought of over a decade ago, and I can't wait to finally talk about them. And they're going to be 1 season long videos, so they won't take too long to wait. So, see you guys then.